order the Ordinance Committee meeting of October 1st, 2025. And if we could start with a roll call.
Councilmember Gutierrez. Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Chair Sneddon.
Here, thank
Thank
you.
you.
And we're having some echoing in the room, so we might need to address that. But do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
And any public comment for items not on the agenda?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll hear staff presentation on California building and fire codes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Sneddon and committee members. My name is Tina Dye. I'm the Chief Building Official for the city, and with me I have Ryan DiGilio, the Fire Marshal and Battalion Chief. And we are happy to present the triennial update of the building and fire codes.
We'll just pause for just a second to take care of the echo in the room. So we'll be on pause for just a minute.
Testing.
Okay, with that, we'd like to proceed with staff presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sneddon. So I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself. That's Tina Dye, Chief Building Official. What's that? The echo is still happening. Do we want to continue or?
Yes, let's pause again.
Got it. I can try to do it without the mic. I can try to do it without the mic. Speak up. Test. Okay. Test, test, test. Test.
Blame it on Ryan. I don't know which one. Check, 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 check. Check. It is you. There's a mystery speaker going on right here. This is you. check.
Chair Sutton and committee members, Tina Dye, Chief Building Official, here with Ryan DiGilio, Battalion Chief and Fire Marshal, and we are presenting the Triennial Code Update Ordinance changes. So I'll start with a little bit of information about what building standards are. California Code of Regulations is divided into 28 separate titles. Oh, excuse me. There we go. So the California Code of Regulations is divided into 28 separate titles and contains the regulations of around 200 state agencies. Title 24 is reserved for the Building Standards Code. Title 24 consists of 12 parts that apply to the design, construction, and alteration of buildings, facilities, and equipment for privately and publicly owned buildings in California. It contains requirements for structural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, and requires measures for energy conservation, sustainability, construction and maintenance, fire, life safety, and accessibility. In addition, there are measures for existing buildings and historical buildings. So Building and Safety adopts parts 1 through 8 and 10 through 12, and the Fire Department adopts parts 9 and part 7. A little bit about the state code development process. The state codes are on a 3-year cycle with a public hearing process including input from local stakeholders, state agencies, local fire and building officials, and the general public. State codes are based on the national and international codes, and this process is facilitated by the Building Standards Commission. So state codes go into effect on January 1st, 2026, and compliance is mandatory. No ordinance is required if no local amendments are being made, but cities and counties may amend the state codes via local ordinance, and this should be done as close as possible and not 30 days before January 1st, 2026. The local amendment process can be, amendments can be made by local jurisdictions, but must be more restrictive and must be based on findings that are administrative, geologic, topographic, or climatic in nature. So some outreach for the proposed local amendments. State law, first of all, requires advertisement of notice to amend the state codes for 2 successive weeks, and it also requires 2 public hearings. So we have introduction and first reading scheduled for November 18th. That's a typo on the PowerPoint, so apologize for that. But November 18th, 2025 is our first reading to City Council. And second reading and adoption will be scheduled for December 2nd. Some additional voluntary outreach is this meeting today, the Ordinance Committee meeting. And we've also posted the information on our website. We've provided public flyers that are available at our public counters at 630 Garden. We spread the news via electronic notification, and we will also be posting to the local newspapers. So in attachment 2 and 4 of the staff report, you will find a summary matrix table of our existing and proposed local amendments. You'll find them by code section and number, general amendment, a description of the proposed amendment, the type of amendment, whether it's new, existing, or revised, and then the findings that are required for the state to honor our amendments. This cycle, we don't have a lot of amendments, but we have made a couple of administrative changes to reflect current practices that weren't previously codified or that just needed an update. Both the building and fire codes have been updated to include a new table for higher hazard occupancies to help determine when fire sprinklers are needed, along with adding some clearer language defining what counts as a remodel. We're also proposing to re-adopt all of our previously adopted amendments in all chapters related to structural, fire, life safety, and administrative provisions. And the biggest change is the addition of the 2025 Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is now a standalone code. The provisions were already in the building and fire code previously. They've just moved out of those codes and are their own code, is its own code. Other amendments are administrative, and they include updating references and minor language changes, but generally don't include any technical changes. And our local amendments have been reviewed by our planning department and have been deemed exempt from CEQA requirements. And that is the end of the presentation. The recommendation is that the ordinance committee recommend for approval to the city council an ordinance amending Santa Barbara Municipal Code 2204 and 804, adopting by reference the 2025 California Building Standard Codes Part 1 through 12, and certain dependency of said codes, adopting local amendments to said codes, and repealing ordinances 6093 and 6094. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, Councilmember Jordan.
Only one. So I just, there's a paragraph in the staff report that talks about making amendments to address local conditions and needs, then follows up with a really nice sentence that says one of our goals is to allow for a smoother, more user-friendly process. Anything jump out in these a couple pages worth of additions and all the documentation? Is there anything that jumps out that that is really good, or anything that jumps out that's going to be a heads up to the development community?
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. So there is nothing significantly different that will have a negative impact on any of our designers or property owners. The language that we did add clarifies some of the struggles we've been having in plan review and inspection, clarifies what constitutes a remodel for the requirement for sprinklers. So that was a really great addition that Ryan and I worked on to help people through the process and with a better understanding of when it's
Good.
required.
Yep, I'm glad to hear there's nothing drastic too. So thank you.
Councilmember Gutierrez, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. And then I have a couple questions. One, it's a really welcome addition to have the Wildland Urban Interface Code within this code. So I think that's really nice to have that there. I had two questions. One, question that has come up about sort of window treatments or different treatments on historic structures that also are in the high fire. And I'm not sure if this is where we would address this, but I guess it's a question about where to address that. Sort of, I would think that the fire codes would supersede the historic codes, but is that something that we would address here or elsewhere?
Thank you, Chairson. It would be addressed in our local amendments if we wanted to make something more restrictive, but we're already requiring the minimum of the code, so those provisions are being required even in a historic building.
I think not necessarily more restrictive, but like conflicting restrictive. Like the historic codes might say it needs to be wood frame, window frame, and single pane glass versus what might be safer in high fire is double pane and a different material for the framing. And I wouldn't expect it to be changed today, but I was just wondering sort of what the mechanism or where to start addressing that. It's come up a couple times.
Okay, thank you for that, Chairson. We can look into it for you and see if there's anything we can do to change it,
Thank
to
you.
make it more consistent with each other.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And then the other question I have, and I'm not sure if this is be where it would be addressed or not, is about, I know Councilmember Friedman and I have talked about it being okay, or whether it is okay or not, to have a boat or a trailer park in your own driveway. And is that a fire safety code issue, or is it just an aesthetic issue?
Thank you, Chairson. I believe that's regulated by the zoning code and not related to what we're doing here today or the building and fire code.
Just wanted to make sure there wasn't any extra fire code hazard there with that. Okay. Those are my only questions. And Councilmember Jordan?
Yeah, just say drag Ryan in here, I might as well make him answer a question. So there's a section of the Mesa, my neighborhood, big section over there that's working its way through a fire-safe community status, as you probably know. And it's interesting, some of the feedback I'm getting from the people is that, you know, the two easiest things is like your mesh on a vent and your chop your plants back, your plants that'll burn. And then realizing that anything else on the list that is a better deterrent is like knock your whole house down and rebuild your house, right? I mean, being a little flippant, but you know, no wood fences, no vinyl windows, which now I'm convinced are the sign of death, because you know, you could do everything else to your house, but if you have a vinyl window, that's the first thing that's melting and providing you know, a garage door to get into your house. So I'm just wondering, when and how do we ever touch that third rail and start talking about particular areas? Like if you're saying I've been evacuated 10 times in 20 years, you're in a problem area, right? And so is there ever a method that you get to have a conversation safely without being run out of town to talk about the harder challenges to meet for making your house fireproof, and how those should happen at new construction or remodel, and start to, you know, just take little nibbles at making the housing stock safer. I mean, what's just kind of your thoughts on that? And you know, does that ever happen in our lifetime or not?
Yeah, Committee Member Jordan, through the chair. Those are all really good points. The beauty of the code adoption cycle process is that some of those things are already in play for new construction. New construction is almost like a checkbox when it comes to fire safety, especially in the high fire hazard areas. The state, it took all the way back to the conflagrations in San Diego County way back in 08, I can't remember, a long time ago, for the legislation to catch up to where it is today, as it takes in this process. So when it comes to new construction, all the different requirements are already in place, right? Fire resistant construction, types of material that are used, getting your landscape approved before it's put in, proper spacing. New construction's a no-brainer, and that's where this code cycle comes into play and really is an advantage. The tricky part is the retro, actively going into people's neighborhoods, 30, 40-year, 50-year-old houses, commercial and or single-family dwellings, to go, what do we do with this problem, right? Unfortunately, that's what we saw down in Altadena, especially in Pasadena, very old California bungalow houses that didn't have any of these items that we're speaking of today. Maybe some of them did. I shouldn't lump all of them in. But that's where it gets tricky, is where's the correct line as a city or a governmental agency or even a punitive stance of, hey, you've been in your house for 40 years, but you now have to do this to it. That's where it gets a little tricky. So our stance in the fire department at this point is through that more of that education process and taking those little nibbles, right? Put some screens on your vents. Do you have to put a Class A roof on your house? You can. Would it help? You bet. Most people can't afford that, right? So how do we go in there and get on a neighborhood basis and get our groups together and show them the little things to do? Because the little things are better than nothing at this point. And until either the state comes down with retroactive regulations that have to occur on people's homes, or the city in a standalone process in coordination with a code adoption cycle says you have to do this, it's more of a community-based education approach until we go the enforcement route.
Fair enough.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't a question you could answer. And, you know, it becomes pretty clear to me, too, that even if you were to embark on that process and when you could start to pick off the obvious low-hanging fruit to make them do something, you know, the people that are still marginally at risk are only as good off as the people that are around them. I mean, right? I mean, you could have a whole block of houses that have done all the little stuff, but one guy or two people who aren't doing some of the stuff, and if they're the jump from over there to there and into your neighborhood, that's it. So it's just, I just wonder when, I don't know, it seems like such a big picture for the state to do it, and we probably more so than many areas of the state have a tougher history in regards to fire exposure than is painted by the big brush of the state requirements. So,
Yeah, and if I could, I'd just add on as well. I think a tone between the building department and the fire department is that we have been, I would say, ahead of the curve when it comes to state regulations and state requirements. A lot of jurisdictions are seeing this WUI code for the first time and going, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? I have no idea what this is. Where our separate disciplines have already been implementing a lot of this locally, and the state's catching up to us and now publishing a WUI code that has it all together. So, if and until we want to take the next step and whatever that looks like locally, it's where we're at right now.
thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Doimus, did you have? Yes.
Sorry about that. Yes, Chair Stenham, thank you. Councilmember, I just want, you made a good point about kind of home hardening or wildlife hardening. So I think it's a good point. We'd be remiss to mention Assembly Bill 130 and Assembly Bill 306 now has created a kind of a moratorium or freeze. So up to June 1st, 2031, we cannot adopt more restrictive building standards. So this is kind of our last go at it for 6 years. But there are exceptions to that. One of the exceptions being for emergency situations, and that specifically includes home hardening, wildlife fires. So we are not limited in the next few years to even, have even more aggressive standards than the state does. Again, this also doesn't apply to commercial property, just residential too. So just wanted to add that point.
Mr. Doimus, as a follow-up question to that, we can't have more restrictive, but we can't have less restrictive either.
That's a great question, Chair Stenham. Yeah, we're kind of stuck with this last update when it comes to residential properties, unless emergency exception applies. Another example, if it's part of the general plan that was adopted prior to October of this year, and to implement that can be done as well. So there are a couple exceptions, but for the next 6 years, at least the state has kind of said, we're kind of putting a freeze on residential building standards, in terms of the restrictiveness. We can't be,
Okay.
so that's why this is the last important update. And staff did an amazing job. We're just kind of stuck with this pressure and this timeline and to get it through for the changes that we have right now.
So that actually makes this question more important then about this issue between HLC and fire and safety codes. I mean, we can talk in detail about it offline, which specific properties that
Sure.
were really caught in this. They didn't want to put wood fencing in, but wood fencing is what was historic, and they didn't want to do single pane windows, but that's what was historic. And so, and it's in the high fire zone. So if this is our last chance for 6 years, I'm wondering if we might have a look at that before we approve this, or, you know, I'm just worried we wouldn't later then be able to make an amendment or change.
Sure, I'll let
to it.
Mr. Busquanza go first on that, please.
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair Sneddon, and I know this isn't related to building code updates, but with the single-family streamlining project, we are adding things to the guidelines that can allow for home hardening and things like that to be approved administratively. So we're trying to build in that flexibility to allow people to maybe not follow what was the strictest interpretation previously.
Perfect, thank you. So it would be in that process and not through the building and safety codes. Thank you so much, thank you. Okay, and I agree, this is really excellent work. I remember a lot of different times this has come through. There were a lot of little points to talk about, but this seems very thorough, straightforward, and like I say, really, really appreciate having the, the WUI codes in here also, all in one place. Do we have any other questions or comments? No? Another motion?
Oh, wait, we have public comment
Oh,
on
we have
this
some
item.
public comment, yes.
So we have Steve Johnson, who would like to make comment on this item. Mr. Johnson, if you could unmute and go ahead and speak.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm going to switch over to my notes. I have a few minor editorial observations about the proposed ordinance related to the California Building Code. Not sure if you have these documents in front of you, but on page 2, there's a reference at the top to section 22.4.010. And then right after it, it uses the identifier 22.4.10. For consistency, if it was all 22.4.010, that'd just be more consistent. Also on page 2, under the discussion of 22.4.10, there's an identifier item B as in boy. It's used twice. Item A is incorrectly crossed out. I think the intent was to cross out the B and keep A as the correct identifier. Again, minor. Another minor defect, the page numbering for this ordinance is page 1 through 9, then page 1, then page 10, then page 10 again, then page 13. Obviously, it should have been after 9, 10, 11, 12, but it's a little editorial notes. My biggest concern is with the this treatment of Appendix G, CBC Building Code Appendix G, which in my mind is not formally part of the building code. You could, in fact, the ordinance recognizes that. It says CBC parts 1 and 2 are adopted, including, and then it says including Appendix G. Then it goes down to Amendment CC, that's on page 16 of the ordinance, where page 16 effectively deletes all of Appendix G and inserts some other language. But I just note that it'd be much simpler if on page 2, if it simply said exclude Appendix G, you wouldn't have to include it and then fully exclude it. Just confuses things. But the biggest issue is the language that is added to Appendix G that I think basically tends to emphasize that FEMA's policies recognize FEMA standards. In fact, how I've learned last year that rely on both FEMA and ACE 24 standards, and when the two are in conflict, the more restrictive of the two applies, which has led to a very sensible city policy. I'll just summarize it as the 75% test, a very sensible policy. I want to make sure, I think the public should.
And if you are out of time, so if you can close your comments, finish them.
I'll very briefly say, good opportunity to clarify that 75% test, which is in conflict with 22-24-070. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention to detail. Could we have staff response? Yeah.
Certainly, thank you, Chair Stettin. We'll definitely look at the clerical errors in the staff report to address the Appendix G adoption. It is included in the adoption, and it also references our local floodplain ordinance, which refers to the ACE standard that Mr. Johnson is referring to. So it's all included.
Thank you. And then I think often when we see drafts, the ongoing editing changes are shown, but then when we see it all cleaned up, then those numbers and the letters will all align. Were there any? Oh, I had one more question. If any of these were to be appealed, that would go to the Fire and Building Code Board of Appeals, or is there any appeal process if somebody had an issue?
With the code adoption? Thank you, Chair Stettin. No, that would be appealed to City Council if it was approved by City Council.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With the codes themselves?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
You're right. They would go to the the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals if they disagreed with one of our interpretations.
Okay.
Building official or fire chief, or fire marshal, sorry.
Yes. So it would be with the interpretation, not with the codes themselves? Okay.
Correct.
Thank
Chair
you so
Stettin.
much. Okay. I think with that, we are ready for a motion.
So I'll move the staff recommendation with the corrections that are needed to the documents.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Do we have a second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. And can we have a vote?
Recommendation moved by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez, that the Ordinance Committee review and recommend for approval to the City Council on ordinance amending Santa Barbara Municipal Code Chapters 22.04 and 8.04, adopting by reference the 2025 California Building Standard Codes and the 2025 Fire Code, Parts 1 through 12, certain appendices of each of those codes, adopting local amendments to those codes and repealing ordinances 6093 and 6094, and to ensure that staff will address all clerical errors. Okay. And corrections. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to do a verbal roll call vote. Councilmember Gutierrez,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
and Chair Sneddon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.